Here's another one, Father, Cato said as he pointed north. I can't tell how many, maybe 15 or 20. From his perch on the wall, the boy could see across the open hillside and down to the road from Jerusalem. That highway was part of a trade route for merchants and other travelers of all kinds, from Syria and Egypt and beyond. Sometimes he saw caravans going by with more camels and horses than he could count. With the mid-afternoon sun shining over his shoulder, Cato was watching a group who had left the main road, climbing the gentle slope in his direction toward Bethlehem. The son loved to accompany his father to the gate and pretend he was a watchman, guarding the town behind him. Sometimes he carried a stick and practiced swinging it, imitating his father swinging a sword. Cato was happy that he and his father shared the same name. He looked up to his father in every way, proud that he was a soldier, even though many resented him because he took orders from Rome. Whenever allowed, Cato went with his father to his post. He learned to stay out of the way, but close enough so they could talk when his father wasn't busy. Cato's eyes were fixed on the cluster of those walking or riding donkeys, getting closer, approaching the city wall. They're almost here, Cato yelled. Yes, I see them, his father replied. The elder Cato stood next to the gate, an imposing figure. His bronze helmet glinted in the sunlight. Over his tunic, he wore a shirt of mail armor, a weave of small iron rings riveted together, row upon row, protecting from his shoulders down to his hips. Drawn tight around his waist was a heavy leather belt that held his sword on his left hip. His boots, also leather, were laced up the front of his feet to just above his ankles. Everything about his appearance signaled military power. Cato and the other Roman soldiers were stationed in Bethlehem to keep order. He'd been in the province of Judea a long time, longer than most, long enough to marry a Jewish wife and have children. The oldest child spent many days with him. Fortunately, most days were peaceful, and the few incidents could be handled quickly and decisively. No one wanted to be on the wrong end of a Roman sword. Nearby Jerusalem had some steady turbulence from Jews who defied the power of Rome. It was even worse when Caesar ordered a new census. All knew the count meant more taxes. Farther north in Galilee, some Jews were openly resistant and even harassed other Jews who did register. So everyone was on edge. Plus, many were unhappy they had to travel long distances to be counted in the city of their ancestors. That was probably true of those coming toward the gate. The father glanced up to make sure his son was at a safe distance. Then he began to inspect the travelers as they entered, taking note of any who looked like trouble. Younger Cato had been counting and realized his early estimate was good. The group numbered 17 travelers, strung out in smaller parties of 2 or 3 or 4. Cato studied the last 2. A man holding the reins of a donkey, carrying a young woman. They moved slowly, carefully on the rocky terrain, lagging behind the others. She sat upright and steady, but he seemed concerned about her. As they arrived at the gate, she spied Cato on the wall and nodded to him. Inside the wall, the others had waited for the man and woman. Travelers banded together to make it safer for everyone, especially in areas known for robbers and outlaws. Some in their group had likely journeyed together a week or more. Others had joined for only the last few miles from Jerusalem. Once through the gate, the group circled to express gratitude and good wishes to each other before they went their separate ways inside the town. Cato watched them below. They looked weary but relieved to reach their destination. When the young woman got off the donkey with some assistance, Cato noticed her belly pushing out against her tunic. She was going to have a baby soon. Well, that's why they were so careful and slow. The rest of the group surrounded her and wanted to bless her for the baby she would soon deliver. Come on, move along. You can't all stand here blocking the gate. The voice of Cato's father carried over the rest and punctured the moment. The travelers gestured farewell to each other and dispersed quietly. The young woman and man led the donkey toward the center of town. She moved with some difficulty, leaning back to keep her balance. When they turned onto a side street, Cato's curiosity stirred, and he decided to follow. Father, he shouted as he climbed down from the wall, I'm going to start home. I'll see you there for supper. The elder Cato waved in his son's direction, but he was already focused on several leaving the city, just then going through the gate. The boy easily caught up to the couple, and when he turned the same corner, they were just ahead in front of a small house, talking with a man at the door. The sound of his warm greeting filled the street. Leaving the donkey outside, the couple followed him into the house. Cato heard the room full of voices and laughter as he walked slowly past the open door. He was still curious about the couple, but satisfied they had found where they belonged. He continued his roundabout way home, starting to notice his stomach eager for supper. The next morning, Cato accompanied his father to the open square beside the market. As usual, he had difficulty keeping up with his dad's long strides without breaking into a trot for more speed. Even this he loved about being with his father. He was glad to have the same name, and his dad explained their name came from someone way back in their family. Cato couldn't remember exactly, but it was someone like his great-great-great-grandfather's uncle, who was a famous soldier and senator in Rome. The name Cato means wisdom, and his father told him that he wanted him to grow up to be very wise. Cato often wondered what that would look like, and he kept watching his father to learn. At the square, the elder Cato joined the other soldiers, nearly the entire garrison, as they surrounded the grounds and the gathering crowd. People were lining up to be counted. Most were cheerfully making the best of the wait, chattering with the news of the day or meeting strangers arrived for the census. A few wandered across to the market and back with something to eat or drink. Some showed their frustration and impatience by glaring at the Roman soldiers. Cato knew that look. He had seen it before, how some people stared at his father. Sometimes that look spilled onto him when he was beside his father. Even some of his mother's family, some of his cousins, had a scornful face they saved for Cato's father. Although he felt safe with his dad, Cato wasn't always sure where he belonged, like he was caught between two worlds. His mother and father seemed to bridge the Jewish and Roman divide. They made it work and appeared happy. Their affection for each other made a good home for Cato and his sisters. But he had heard the sharp criticism aimed at his mother for marrying a Roman. Sometimes Cato felt like an outsider within their clan and with the other boys his age. It was one reason he loved to spend the hours with his father. The crowd gradually swelled to fill the square. The boy recognized many faces, but there were also strangers, people he'd never seen before, or only as they entered the city gate. He meandered through the square, stopping here and there to talk with a friend, to listen to an unfamiliar accent, or just to watch the fascinating mix of people. Suddenly, he heard a commotion near the registrar's table. Someone angry was shouting, and other voices joined in. Cato felt himself jostled in the uneasy crowd, but he wasn't tall enough to see what was happening. He snaked his way toward the market and the edge of the throng. At the stall of one of the wool merchants, he found a stool and stepped onto it. He surveyed the confusion, but couldn't spot his father. However, other soldiers were converging on the center of the shouting. The rush of soldiers added to the alarm. At first, people had been reluctant to give up their place in line. Then, in seconds, the chaos became more threatening, and the crowd began to spread in every direction. Out of the corner of his eye, Cato noticed the man and the woman with child he'd seen the day before. They were moving as quickly as they dared, which wasn't very fast. Without hesitation, Cato jumped off the stool and hurried toward them. Her husband, he assumed, held her by one arm. Cato came alongside to take her other arm. He pointed and then guided them to a safe refuge at the back of the market. The disturbance ended as quickly as it started. Soldiers had isolated 4 offenders and began to lead them away from the square. No one appeared to be hurt. The noise of the scattered and curious crowd subsided. The registrar, who had fled from his table, returned to his chair carrying his logbook like something he would never let go. And then Cato saw his father motioning for people to get back in line. "Thank you for your help," the young woman said to Cato, regaining his attention. "Yes, thank you. My name is Joseph, and this is Mary," the man added. Cato nodded slowly and answered, "My name is Cato. I saw you coming through the gate yesterday." "Of course," said Mary. "Our eyes met then. I saw you looking over the wall. Are you the town watchman?" she asked with a smile. No, my father is one of the Roman soldiers to keep order here, and he allows me to climb to that overlook on the city wall." "Well," answered Joseph, "then your father's Caesar is the reason we are here, along with everyone else to be counted in the city of David. This is where all my family is from, but Mary has never been in Bethlehem before." While Joseph spoke, Mary noticed that Cato's eyes had lowered to her belly. She put her hands there and said, "You were so kind to notice that I needed extra help. I'm not very nimble right now, but soon I will bring my son into this world, and I hope he is as thoughtful as you." Cato wasn't sure what to say, but her sincere words made him happy. The small thing he had done really counted for something and someone. "There you are," his father's voice called from several stalls away. "I've been looking for you. Make sure you're safe." Before Cato could reply, Joseph said, "He's not only safe, he also helped us to safety." "Very good," Cato's father replied, somewhat matter-of-factly, as if he expected nothing else. "It's okay now," he continued. "You can get back into line for the registrar." Cato began toward his father, and then turned back to the couple. "I hope you're very happy when your baby comes." Several days later, Cato's father was assigned to the morning watch at the gate on the other side of Bethlehem. Young Cato stomped his feet every now and then to keep them warm. He didn't mind the early chill when he got to see the sunrise, and the rosy clouds announced it would arrive soon. The gate facing southeast had much less traffic because it opened toward the wilderness. But scarcely 3 miles away, the fortress of King Herod towered over Bethlehem. It was the king's refuge closest to Jerusalem, atop the highest point in the Judean desert. For years, the people of Bethlehem observed the contractors and an army of slaves reshaping the mount and hauling huge stones upward to the king's project. Then, during the years of construction, the Bethlehem gate in that direction was much busier. Now the gate was usually quiet, except for an occasional traveler or shepherds heading out with a flock. The king's mountain palace was completed around the time Cato was born. So for him, it was always a part of the desert landscape. The height and grandeur always impressed him. He marveled that anyone could build something so spectacular. He squinted into the early sun, now above the horizon, casting a golden sheen everywhere. His eyes were fastened to that view when his ears began to deliver a different message. Voices nearby and getting closer. First he saw their heads bobbing at the ridge of the nearest vale. Then the full figures of 3 shepherds emerged and ascended toward the gate. Cato couldn't make out what they were saying, but he sensed their agitation. His father had heard them also, because the elder Cato stepped beyond the wall to get a better look. And he puzzled why they were approaching with such haste and without any sheep. When they were close enough, one of the shepherds yelled, "We're looking for a newborn. We heard from the heavens that he's arrived, the Messiah, in Bethlehem." They came through the gate, breathless from their rush. They looked hopefully at the elder Cato and the other Roman soldier. But both soldiers just shook their heads and shrugged their shoulders. Once in a while, they heard rumors about a new Messiah or king to rule Judea, but nothing ever came of it. "Wait," cried Cato from the steps on the tower wall. "Wait, I think I know who you're looking for and where they are." He raced down the steps toward the shepherds, glancing at his father on the way. Cato didn't exactly know the shepherds, but he'd seen them before many times. How peculiar for them to be without their sheep. Whatever happened on the hills must have dazzled them to leave their flocks. "Come with me," Cato urged. He hadn't seen the young couple since the day at the public square. The woman, Mary, said she was going to have a son. Something deep inside Cato told him their child must be the one the shepherds were seeking. He led them more than halfway through town, closer to the main gate on the far side, heading to the street and house where he had seen the couple stop the day they arrived. While they walked, the shepherds explained they were to find the boy in a swaddling cloth, lying in a manger. Cato had no idea why the baby would be in a feeding trough, but he surged forward, more certain as he went. By now, the town had awakened with the sun. Others were stirring in the street and looked quizzically at the boy leading shepherds on some curious errand. When they arrived in front of the house, Cato pointed to the door and allowed one of the shepherds to knock. The door was opened by the same man Cato had seen before. At first, he was wary of the strangers at his doorstep. But as soon as they mentioned their search for a newborn, the man smiled and said, "Yes, I can show you." Instead of inviting them inside, though, he began to lead them around the house. He explained, "You're looking for Mary and Joseph and their son. We heard his first cries during the night. When they arrived in Bethlehem a few days ago, they surprised us. Our home was already filled with kin, but we have a cozy spot around back, warmed by the company of the animals." They rounded the back corner of the house to see a crude but sturdy wooden structure leaning against the stone house. When they went far enough, they could see inside. Over the matting of straw, Joseph, Mary, and a tiny infant wrapped in swaddling and lying in a manger, just as the shepherds had been told. Cato was thrilled as he gazed into the tender scene, but the shepherds were even more animated. They talked over one another with reports of the glory of the Lord shining around them, an angel voice with good news, a promise of a Savior, a birth, great joy for all the people, and a heavenly multitude praising God. Their stories spilled out with such exclamations and fluttering enthusiasm that Joseph and Mary laughed and shook their heads. Cato tried to picture what the shepherds described on the hillside. The fuss of the shepherds caused the baby to stir. He began to cry out, apparently hoping to be fed. Mary picked him up and cradled him in her arms. She looked at Cato and said, "Again, you have brought us a blessing. Thank you for helping these men to deliver their message. I will always treasure these moments." Joseph stood up and stepped closer to the visitors. His eyes welled with tears. They could see better when he came into the sunlight. He drew a deep breath and said, "We came here to be counted, but now I know this is what really counts. He is the one who really counts." He pointed to the child in his mother's arms. On his way back to his father at the eastern gate, Cato wondered if he'd see that little family again. He hoped so. Then he said to himself, "If I want to be wise, like my name says, I think I should always remember this. If I want to be wise, I should always remember that baby boy." Invite any of you who are able to stand and let's sing the next carol together.